This is Whiskey Wanderlust.
And we're on an expedition to discover how Colorado is elevating craft spirits from grain to glass.
We bring whiskey explorers like you an inside look at the distilled stories, colorful characters, and rich flavors that make Colorado a true whiskey frontier.
So, pour yourself a dram
And join us on an unforgettable journey.
In this episode, Law's Whiskey House.
Welcome everyone to the fourth episode of Whiskey Wanderlust. I'm Corey.
I'm Ryan.
That's Ryan. Thanks for joining us again today. First of all, we want to thank everybody for their ongoing support. We're now on episode 4, and we've seen a lot of great just support throughout to get us to this point, right? Awesome interviews, and we're building a little bit of a fan base, which has been great, and we really want to appreciate you guys for your involvement with that, sharing stuff on social or spreading the word. It's been great. And be sure, if you're not subscribed yet, be sure to like and subscribe this episode here, and be sure to drop us a rating, and we might be giving out some shirts to some of your reviewers out there. So really cool, fun shirts we've been making. So be sure to drop us a note and we'll get in touch. But today's episode is now episode 4, and we are interviewing Law's Whiskey House, up in Denver. And Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to talk to Casey Rizzo, who is the brand manager at Law's Whiskey House, and Sam Poirier, who is the head distiller. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a really fun time going up there and talking with them, and getting a tour of the facility and just talking whiskey with those two.
Well, one of the cool things, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we were able to get not only a tour of their facility there, but before it was finished, their tasting room. Yeah. Which I might as well talk about it now, right? Yeah. We were able to kind of see the new tasting room while it was still in progress. And in December, we were able to go back and actually attend the soft opening for that space there, the Whiskey Sanctuary. And it's a beautiful space. It is fantastic. Yeah. If you guys are in the Denver area, look up the Whiskey Sanctuary, go get a taste, go get a tour. The lounge there is top rate, beautiful staircase. It's now done like a whiskey barrel. If you want to check out a little more, check out the reel we put up on Instagram in December. But tell us a bit more. What else stood out to you?
So the thing that I really like about Law's is their whole there are no shortcuts ethos. And just so that's something that I try to live my life by. Like personal development, and I don't want to take any shortcuts. I want to do things the right way. I want to make things methodical and do it the right way. And so I really appreciated that they're not taking any shortcuts, which also led into with Al the decision to not really open up and make other spirits early on, right? So, yeah. Well,
and I mean, so Al, the founder, right, from Canada, came to Denver by way of New York for a long time, and he founded the distillery really incognito, right? Had apparently Gargoyle Industries, and Sam even talks about it was trying to find the place before it was even open. And so Sam's been there for 13 years, right? Because they just celebrated 13 years. Yeah. So he's been there a long time. But the dedication to just crafting whiskey, and then him making a certain promise to his wife, which is kind of fun. Which if you guys go to the tasting room, you'll see 2 things. First of all, that there is no shortcuts ethos is in the
speakeasy.
The speakeasy tasting room that you come into at the end of the tours, and there's a big black wall with gold lettering. It says there are no shortcuts. And then there you can also get samplings of Marianne's Promise, which is the rum that they make specifically for the tasting room. So be sure to check that out as well. But the whole gargoyles thing, the whole Gothic theme runs really throughout the new tasting room and stuff, which is really cool. Yeah, which is called the Whiskey Sanctuary. Right. And it's really cool. They've got like this, the tour starts and they're in this little kind of like a chapel almost type area with pews. Real pews from a Methodist church.
And then huge windows where you can see their grain storage outside. And so it's an awesome space.
Well, and one of the fun things you'll see in the episode today is behind us there's a drawing. It's a chalkboard drawing. And I remember this chalkboard drawing. And there's been some debate over which version I saw originally, but Casey drew the one that you see in the episode, and they've carried that. It's basically a diagram of the distilling process and their practices there. and it's hand drawn, and they've kept some of those elements in the new tasting room. So now they have a chalkboard with the same kind of hand drawings in the new whiskey church there, and it's really, really cool.
And the original chalkboard still lives on. It's in the tasting room. You gotta look for it. You gotta keep your eyes open. So if you stop in there, look for it.
There's a special place for that one in the hallway. Yes, it still lives on, which is cool. But talking with Casey and stuff about that and her involvement with, she's been with Laws a long time as well. And probably, and kind of on that same note, right? It takes a village ethos.
Yeah.
The thing that stood out to me, and Casey and Sam both really talked about this a lot, was the family. It takes a village methodology that they go through, and they really seem like a tight-knit group. Obviously, their efforts come out in their spirits. I mean, they're producing some of the best bourbon coming out of Colorado today, and I think anywhere really. That's my personal opinion. I really love their work, but it comes out in anything they're doing, including the new tasting room, including the interview. I think you guys will see it come through, really, how they talk about everything. It's really cool. So it's a good family oriented project there for sure.
Yeah. And I really appreciate how, with it taking the village, just how everybody kind of has some input into the final product. And Sam's title is head distiller, but he's not master distiller because they don't have a master distiller, because they just have a team working on all the products they're putting out. So it's super cool.
And some of the things that you weren't privy to were some things that happened off screen, which actually speaks to this particular version of the bourbon here. This is a special release that they released only to Costco. But Sam and Al both spoke very highly of that particular release. If you have an opportunity to get your hands on a bottle of that from secondary market somewhere, I'd encourage you to do so. It's one of their best.
Maybe someone can reach out to you and buy a couple of the stock.
They're going to pay a premium price for that for sure. I may have gotten more than one bottle.
Yeah, same here.
But the other thing is too, at the whiskey van, I gotta mention this. One of the cool things they had is a calligrapher who was etching on the glasses or the bottles for everybody, and so we ended up getting whiskey Wanderlust etched onto one. We each got a bottle and got whiskey Wanderlust etched on the bottle, so it was a special thing. So and really, this is a big thank you to Casey and Sam for inviting us out for that particular soft opening event. It was great. It was a great event, and just really goes back to the start where we interviewed them and just had a great time. So thank you guys for inviting us up there and letting us participate in that for sure.
Appreciate that. And then also there'll be a bonus or bootleg episode. We'll call it bootleg. Coming out. We got to catch up with Al at the soft opening event. And we expected to have maybe like a couple minutes. He could just tell us, like, oh, it's great to have it open now. But he sat down and had a full conversation. And so you were able to have a full interview conversation with him. And so we'll be putting that out here in a short time. So if you're not subscribe so you can be on the lookout for that too. But it was a really cool conversation.
Yeah, we talked about the process for the building and then the whiskey, and he really dove into it there as well. And you probably won't see it in the final cut, but we got interrupted by a state senator, which was really cool. It was really cool to meet her, and just it really, the moment really was like the impact that Al has had on the local community there. And people walked in, they were really drawn to him, and he's a very warm and friendly guy. And so we were greatly honored to have the time that he gave us. Like, we felt really we're really grateful for that. So
he's a very gracious host. Yeah,
thank you, Al, for that. I mean, you had a ton of other things to do, shaking hands, and but the time you gave us was great. So we really appreciate that. So we'll get into that though in that bootleg episode. So
yeah. And so without further ado, here's our conversation with Casey and Sam.
Welcome to Whiskey Wanderlust, Corey and Ryan, and we're here with Casey and Sam from Laws Whiskey House here in Denver. And we're excited that they're going to be able to join us and talk to us about their awesome whiskeys they have here. So let's just get into it. So Casey, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Tell us, Laws. Give us a background and how did this place come into being, and tell us a little bit more about Al and Marianne.
Yeah, well, Laws, we've been around for almost 13 years now. So we started distilling in 2011. We didn't open our doors or sell any whiskey until 2013, but Al Laws, our owner, founder, CEO, puts the Laws in Laws Whiskey, and his wife, Marianne, they actually come from Canada. And so he kind of developed a love of whiskey fairly early on in life. You know, I hear that up in Canada, it's pretty much like hockey, maple syrup, whiskey. So started drinking whiskey early on, developed quite a love for whiskey early on, grew up, became an adult, moved to New York and worked on Wall Street for Merrill Lynch. So he was in the oil and gas industry. Maybe not a job that he loved, but maybe not his passion. Definitely paid the bills and supported his whiskey habit. So he has over 600 bottles in his own personal collection at home.
Oh, wow.
All open, all willing to share with family and friends. He's the first person to tell you if you have a good bottle of whiskey, open it, drink it, share it, enjoy it. There's always going to be whiskey aging in a barrel somewhere. So he really was thinking about starting a distillery. He was talking with his wife, Marianne. They were actually thinking about starting it out in Brooklyn, where they were located at the time. But Merrill Lynch transferred him and his family out here to Colorado, where he realized very quickly what a lot of us transplants to Colorado realize, that it's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your family. And it also happens to be a great place to make and age whiskey. So
there seems to be a lot more room out here to take that endeavor on.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we are very much known for this big craft beer boom out here in Colorado, which has been very exciting. And now we're kind of right in the middle of this big kind of craft spirits and whiskey boom, which is awesome.
Got a really educated consumer base here in Colorado. So
well, I mean, in beer in Colorado have gotten a long history, right? Got a few small guys here, right? But it's been fun to, you know, like you said, transplants, right? I'm a transplant, and I moved here from Arizona, where I think when I left, there was like 5 distilleries in the state, and I ran across one of the trail maps here. I was like, holy smokes! And on the map, there was 60 some odd distilleries. I was like, this place is.
Yeah, I think it's probably upwards to 100 now.
Oh
I think you're right. So I mean, it's a great place to start up. So tell us more about that journey, though. Like, he didn't just decide to open up a distillery here. Like, he did some
massive research for it. You know, he's an analyst by trade. So he sat back and analyzed everything, read a lot of books. Him and his wife went down to Kentucky to travel the Bourbon Trail, do a little bit of research, kind of met some people along the way. And one of those people that he met was a gentleman by the name of Bill Friel. Bill was the master distiller of Barton's for over 35 years. He's one of the only living members in the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. He was a consultant in the whiskey world for a long time, and then very happily retired when Al was able to kind of set up this very quick, almost 30-minute meet and greet with him to pick his brain. They were chatting, drinking. 30 minutes turned into an hour, turned into 2 hours. At the end of this conversation, he had convinced Bill to come out here to Denver and help him start this distillery. Wow. So Al obviously has this big passion for whiskey. Bill saw that and really wanted to cultivate that, which we all appreciate. So they came out here. We got this building, all the equipment, and then July 4th, 2011 is when we distilled our first bourbon here.
And Bill was very much a guide in that whole process for Al, but he wasn't necessarily teaching him exactly how to make whiskey, because when he was back here with Bill and they were running their first batches, you know, Al was asking every question he could. He wanted to, you know, use that time while Bill was out here. And Bill would be like, you know, I'm not going to make your whiskey for you, son. What do you think? You know,
interesting.
Yeah. So he was answering every question with a question and guiding Al through that process, but he wasn't going to tell him how to make his whiskey.
Interesting. Yeah. That's definitely that guide mentality is a good thing, right? Because
Al refers to Bill as his Yoda because of that kind of cryptic response to every question.
Right.
Yeah. But then it allowed Al to kind of create everything his own, and so it wasn't just a remake of something else. It was very much his own.
Absolutely. With the confidence that he had someone there who's been doing it for, 40 plus years. So.
Yeah. Well, he didn't guide him or show him the way. He basically kind of hopped on his back and whipped him into shape.
Just wax on and wax off a couple times.
Very much.
So, I mean, let's kind of back up too. I mean, because sounds like Al does research, right? They're making a huge leap coming from New York out here, with the transfer, but they're in a new area, right? Obviously they're tapping some good talent, right? But what was the vision that he originally set out to cast for Laws? And tell us more about that.
Yeah, we have our flagship 4-grain bourbon, which is what started it all. And that was really Al's vision, and still fairly unique to us, with our mash bills 60% corn, 20% wheat, 10% rye, 10% barley. And usually in the bourbon world, you see bourbons either referred to as, wheated bourbons or rye heavy bourbons. So either or is the flavor grain, because sometimes those grains don't really play together very well.
Right.
Al really liked the idea of the drinkability of a wheated bourbon, something like Maker's Mark, with the complexity of a rye heavy bourbon. Something like Four Roses was kind of some inspiration for him. So he really wanted to be able to capture that drinkability of the wheat and the complexity of the rye in a 4-grain bourbon. So it is a little bit more detailed process to be able to express those grains together and get them to play well. But that was really the first thing that started it all.
Yeah, I think he saw there was kind of a gap. There was this missing piece in American whiskey. He wanted to make great traditional American whiskey, but he wanted to have all of his favorite components from whiskeys in one drink, and to experience those flavors or aromas throughout that one sip. So,
I mean, he does a good job. And one of the unique things I've, in talking to you guys too, is your history, right? Is you guys, Al set up to make whiskey, right? And that's it. So there was a 3-year gap between the time that he started distilling to the time that he started selling, right? Whereas a lot of other distilleries go and make other spirits, vodka or gin or whatever. Al didn't do that at first, right? Even though I know you guys have some side projects going on, which hopefully we'd talk about too,
sure.
But it's exclusively whiskey throughout with the Laws label on it, correct?
Yeah. And that was really important to us as well. We've never ever sourced. We've never released kind of a young whiskey under 3 years, really. So that was a big goal. Al wanted to make a straight whiskey. He always wanted to put that on the label from day one, which is at least 2 years old. He made some stuff, aged it for 2 years, kind of was tasting through it. We were well on our way, but not quite there yet. So waited a whole nother year. At 3 years was kind of like, yep, this is a great profile. This is where we want to start. And that's when we first bottled. So we've never released anything under 3 years, and anything that you ever have had from Laws or will have from Laws has always been distilled right here in our distillery.
Wow. It's definitely a unique position to be in, to be able to lay down product for 3 years and not put something out. But Al
for sure.
He's pretty stubborn, and he loves whiskey. He doesn't drink vodka. He doesn't drink beer or wine. This is what he set out to do, is make great whiskey, and you have to be patient to do that. So
yeah. And I understand he had some creative methods to kind of stay afloat during that time, right? As you guys were waiting for things to age.
Yeah, well, for one, I mean, Al and Marianne had their day jobs. It was just them when they started this place. So I think they made the first 50 barrels or so before they brought anyone else in. But yeah, he also, had some friends around that the industry he worked in and met through the corporate side of the world, that he was able to sell off the first barrels that he made to bring some money back in. And those barrels, some of them still exist, are referred to as our origins barrels, because they're the start of it all here at Las Vegas.
Yeah. So. Well, Wall Street's no stranger to liking good whiskey. So, I think he probably had some deep pockets to friends that would enjoy the product. So that's good.
Yeah. And we've been able to buy some of those barrels back over the years. I feel, maybe a few of those friends, originally kind of bought those barrels. It's like, oh yeah, we'll help you out. And in the first couple of years, realized very quickly what they had. So we've been able to sell or buy a few barrels back, but some of those barrels are definitely owned by those people now. And they're like, no, we know what we have. We're not letting those go.
And they're still aging here, correct?
There's not many back there.
Oh, okay.
They have their names written on the outside of the barrels too?
Yeah, they're painted black. Cool. They say Origins. And the Origins series still to this day is kind of our limited release we do once a year to put out something special. So.
Okay. Now, you said Al doesn't drink vodka, but I understand there might be an exception to that.
I don't see Al drink vodka often. Maybe, perhaps there is. Please remind me.
I seem to recall a conversation with some of your friends down the street.
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry. When he does, he prefers the rye vodka from Bear Creek. But the Bear Creek vodka they make down there definitely has a soul and has some flavor to it and some body to it.
For sure.
It's a great vodka, but it has more complexity than something you're buying off the shelf.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of tasting that when we were down there too, and it was awesome.
Yeah,
I don't like vodka really either, especially straight, but it was really good. So
now there was also kind of a unique story behind, because when Al first started this place, a little incognito, right, a little nondescript, right, and he even had a certain sign that was up, before it was Laws, right?
You'll see throughout this distillery as well, quite a few gargoyles hanging around, some of our barrels even say Gargoyle Enterprise as opposed to Laws Whiskey House, some of those older barrels. And, Laws Whiskey Houses are doing business name, but Gargoyle Enterprise is what we fall under. So for the first couple years, this building did say Gargoyle Enterprise out front. Whiskey is a long game. We didn't really want people talking about what we were doing in those first few years.
Knocking on the door. Hey, what are you doing in there?
Yeah, like what's going on in there?
That's happened though, right?
Of course it happened.
We'll get more into that later.
We were very incognito the first 3 years, just kind of making and aging whiskey. And when we were ready to bottle and sell, that is when Gargoyle Enterprise came down and then Laws Whiskey House came up. And so we've been known as Laws Whiskey House forevermore.
And that gargoyle name lives on.
The gargoyle name lives on. So gargoyles are here to protect the good spirits from the bad spirits. So we appreciate them being in our distillery. And we also, you mentioned, we do some side projects and Sam gets to do some fun things. And that goes under our gargoyle name if we're not producing whiskey.
And there was one particular promise that...
yes.
Internally, we refer to it as the broken promise. But so Al's wife Marianne is a rum drinker and she loves rum. So I think part of the negotiation when they were coming up with the ideas to start the distillery was, well, you have to make me rum.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? And we have made that rum. We have never put it out, but we do have a good amount of rum, and I think it's pretty good. Marianne likes it, most importantly. So that was referred to as Marianne's promise, or Marianne's
broken promise throughout the years.
That's what you do. You get a label, right? Marianne's promise, and you have like a forged crack right inside of the bottle.
We do have the labels. It is called Marianne's promise, and you'll see that at some point from us, maybe when we open our new tasting room that we have coming.
Yes, the label's done. It's ready to go. We will launch it with the new tasting room. There may be some different things associated with time and waiting on the label as well. But it is here. So I think Marianne is happy.
And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about your distillery is that your whole ethos is of patience and slowing down. And on the wall in there, there's no shortcuts. And I love. Can you tell us more about that ethos, the patience and the waiting?
Yeah, I mean, we live by that here. We do everything the hard way and the slow way. So from the traditional process we use in our whiskey production to building the company and the brand, we want to do it right and make sure that everything's up to our standards. So it's not a fast process.
It is not. Whiskey takes time. It takes patience. Between that second and third year that Al decided to age that whiskey for that additional year, he went out and got a tattoo of a gargoyle just kind of sitting on a barrel waiting to just symbolize that, you need to be patient. And it takes time. So, that's a big component of whiskey and good whiskey for sure.
The gargoyle is such a cool icon that, I mean, you guys have it kind of more incognito and nondescript as you kind of, layered in things, but it'd be cool to see the gargoyle bless one of your bottles eventually. That'd be now. So tell me, and I'm a little bit of a brand nerd, and talking to you now, I'm kind of realizing, is there significance behind the design of the mark there on the logo?
Yes, there's significance behind everything here.
Not every distillery, though, has that approach. So tell us more about, that looks like a Celtic knot at first glance, but tell me more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is essentially kind of two knots intertwined, really one symbolizing time and one symbolizing process. And where they meet in the middle is where you get that great whiskey.
All right, so let's talk a lot about laws and the origins, but tell us more about your origins, right? Because you had quite a journey to get here, right? And work at events and hospitality, right? Tell us how you ended up here and your journey to become brand manager here at Laws.
Yeah, well, I have always loved whiskey and kind of the beer scene as well. And I really started kind of in this hospitality and events field. I worked in, a very service industry, hospitality focused world for a long time, 60 hours a week till 4:00 in the morning, and got kind of very burnt out on that and pivoted at one point into kind of like an HR role that was fine, but not in any way a passion at all. And I was introduced to Laws, and I actually took my husband here on a tour, and I just instantly fell in love. And after the tour, I was like, I could do that. And he was like, you really could do that. And a few years later, it was kind of by happenstance that I was even seeking anything out, because I had just had a child. So I was on maternity leave. I wasn't thinking about going back to my corporate job. And I was working at a brewery, and Laws just posted that they were hiring for the tasting room, for brand ambassadors in the tasting room. And at the time I had a very small baby. Like, I didn't know if the schedule would work for me. I didn't know like what the hours were or what they were offering. I was like, I have to come in and interview for this position. And I interviewed with the tasting room manager and Sam's wife, Julia, actually. She was in the tasting room at the time, and she was my very first interview. And I got it. And it was like a essentially dream job from the beginning. I never miss a chance to talk about or drink whiskey. So I was just in love from the very beginning. I really like being able to kind of take information about distilling and kind of compress it down to smaller parts for people to understand, for the masses to understand.
Sure. Well, you've done a good job with this thing, right? Because I understand you drew this.
I did draw that, yes. And that's a big part here. We're super nerdy. We really get into education. I think all our brand ambassadors do a really, really great job at introducing whiskey to the masses. So you can come here with very little knowledge or even any sort of love for whiskey and really experience a great tour and get a love for whiskey. And also you can come as an uber whiskey nerd and find stuff for you as well. So yeah, I've kind of just used this opportunity to get my hands dirty wherever I can and say yes to any opportunity that has come my way. And now I get to be more on the brand and marketing side of things, which is pretty awesome.
Do you remember who did your tour when you first came in? Or are they still here?
They are not still here, no. I don't remember who it was, actually.
I was going to ask for Sam.
Oh, I don't give tours.
No. Sam did watch my first tour. So when you become a brand ambassador, one of the first things that you have to do is like do the tour for one of the distillers.
He's a pretty intimidating guy. How did that go?
It was intimidating. It was very intimidating. And I didn't know Sam very well. So it's like, and Sam is obviously a wealth of knowledge. So I was like, oh yeah, here, jump on your first tour. And Sam's going to be here with like a notepad taking notes about how you do. So that was intimidating, but I made it. And he said that I passed and I could go on to the next thing. So
and here you are. How many years ago was that now?
That was 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Or 5 years soon. My 5-year anniversary is coming up.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and you so we back up too, because you mentioned that you kind of have roots here in Colorado, but you're also out east, right? Tell us a little more about, like, you had some family in both places, right? And
yes. Yeah, I kind of bounced back and forth between like the Four Corners area, Durango and Massachusetts. So my dad's always lived in Mass. I moved out here to Durango with my mom when I was very young. So yeah, I bounced back and forth, met my husband back east, and then we moved back out to Denver in 2007. So we've been out here for quite a long time now. But
the reason I bring that up, we got 2 data points now from, right, Al and Marianne moving out from out east. You're now from out east, and I think we've got one more coming, right? Because that's where you're from.
Yes,
right.
That's
you're
right. I'm from Maine originally, and Portland, I will say Al and Marianne are actually from Alberta, Canada. So
that's true. That's true.
Not out east, but they were in New York for a period of time, pretty far north.
Yeah.
So tell us more about your journey then getting here. How did you? Portland to Colorado. Fill us in.
Yeah. So I grew up. My dad had a home still at home. I think as a kid, that image, just the vessel is pretty cool in itself. This kind of copper pot sitting on the stove with a long copper little coil going through the sink with ice in it and then dripping down into a bottle. I think also there was kind of a rebellious nature to that stuck with me. But my dad made very poor quality country wine that I don't, I was a kid. I didn't consume it. I'm told it was pretty terrible. But he would distill it into some version of brandy. So that was my first introduction into distilling when I was a kid. And I think that image always stuck with me. And then growing up in Portland, I grew up around the restaurant scene and the craft beer scene, and worked for a really great spot that took me all over the world, visiting these small farmhouse breweries in Belgium. And we would travel to all different places and get to experience that, meet people. And that was my introduction into the passion of why people do this. So I wanted to learn more about that, and ultimately I dove into reading everything I could about distilling, took some courses, and eventually got an internship here in Colorado. That's what brought me out here in 2012.
Okay.
Which is where I met my wife at a distillery, and been making whiskey ever since. We did a short stint back in Maine helping a friend open a distillery, but my wife is from the Denver area and wanted to come back here, so that brought us back out here. And I was looking for work, and I was talking to the distilleries around the area, and Laws was one of them. And I didn't have an appointment or anything. I just came and I knocked on the door. There was no one out front.
There it is.
But it happened to be Al, who was back here running all the equipment that day. And he was like, "Oh, come on in," and he showed me around. And I think that probably lasted for about an hour. And you could just feel the passion and the reason behind everything he was doing here really struck a chord with me. And, when I walked out the door, I called my wife and I was like, this is the spot I want to work at. I need to be here. And luckily the cards aligned or the stars aligned.
The gargoyles aligned.
The gargoyles aligned. And about a month later, he gave me a call and they had an opening, and I've been here for, almost 10 years.
Okay. So had the gargoyle sign come off when you walked in the door and you knocked?
No, what's funny is, this whole space we're sitting in now was one of our rack houses, the main rack house at the time. And all of the barrels were painted as the gargoyle that we see up here behind us. And when we did our public launch, we had to go in and reface all the barrels because we didn't want to have some confusion. So we had to sand them all down, paint them. And originally, all of the barrels were painted white. Like this is barrel number 100 we have behind me. Because we were painting over that gargoyle and making sure it was all branded properly for the launch.
So you just go around and look at it for every gargoyle sign in the neighborhood knocking, or did you have a inkling that he was doing some distilling?
Well, I had known about it when I was working at another distiller in Colorado. I had heard about him starting up.
Okay.
So I knew it existed here. I don't know that there was any sign on the front of the building at the time. So kind of nondescript warehouse. I think I got the address off the internet. So,
yeah.
Interesting. So word had traveled, so you landed here. So,
so in that time, since you've been here almost 10 years, how have you seen the whiskey itself kind of evolve and change, or has it evolved and changed at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't moved away from any of the core kind of foundations of what we started the company on, but I would say that every little factor has changed over the years. I mean, we're obsessed with making the best whiskey we can. Mm-hmm. And for us, that means we run experiments constantly. If anyone proposes something, we'll debate it, we'll test it out, we'll patiently wait, and then we'll get to taste it on the back end and talk about these things we've seen. But we're not set in stone with like, this is how we make whiskey. We won't ever change. We have changed little things slowly over the years. But we like to think we're making our best whiskey today because of the experience we've had and all these little test runs that we've done over the years. But it's a slow process in whiskey, changing things.
Sure.
And you have to be pretty confident to make a consistent change like that. But really, core to everything we do is showcasing the beautiful grains that we grow here in Colorado and maximizing those flavors. So that's what we're looking at when we're doing anything. That is the pinnacle of what we're trying to do. So.
I certainly want to talk to you about, sourcing locally in Colorado. But before we get there, I mean, when I moved out to Colorado, I had journeyed through Colorado a couple different times. And I discovered like Tenth Mountain and some of the other distilleries in the state. When we first moved to Springs, though, I just found the whiskey trail map and was like starting to explore and end up down. I remember where I first tasted your whiskey because I was down at the Edelweiss restaurant in Colorado Springs, little German restaurant, great place by the way. And I asked the guy, "He was like, what local Colorado whiskeys do you have?" And he said we have Laws. I said, "Well, tell me about it." Like, he's like, "The best whiskey I've ever had." I was like, "Okay, I'll try one." And so, sure enough, I tried. It was like really good. That was near 6 years ago, right? So you guys had been producing for a handful of years at that time, but obviously, I mean, you guys were doing something really good early, right? And you guys have developed a brand for yourself and reputation. So tell me more about how you help maintain the reputation from what you guys are doing while still evolving the future of the brand, and tell me about your role, specifically your role in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are not reinventing how to make whiskey, and Al had Bill here with him to kind of guide him through that process. But what we do here is we're using local Colorado grains with big flavor, grains grown for their flavor, not for their big yield or how easily they are to process in the whiskey production process. We do traditional sour mash whiskey, open air fermentation. We double distill in copper pot stills, and then we age in full size 53-gallon barrels. So following these traditional methods, there isn't a desired end result that's going to be the highest quality. Sure. And we believe that we're using the highest quality ingredients to start with. One of the reasons Al wanted to start this here in Colorado. So maintaining and building off what we already have going for us is pretty easy because we have such a strong system here and so many people who are so passionate about what we do that it makes it pretty easy for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And understand with being here in Colorado, you really want the flavors of Colorado, the terroir of Colorado to come through in the glass. And so what are some of the ways that you feel the grains are coming through in the end product?
Yeah, I mean, we focus on terroir a lot. That's something that is discussed less in the whiskey industry than it is in, say, wine. Mm-hmm. But it plays a huge role in what we do. And that, of course, starts with the grains that we use. When we talk about terroir, we're talking about the varietal of grain that we're using, the conditions it's grown in.
Yeah.
Of course, the production process here in Colorado is pretty unique. And that's mostly a factor when it comes to maturation here at high elevation. But the grains that we're using, terroir, most of those, the three grains, the wheat, the rye, and the barley are coming from Alamosa in the San Luis Valley, where it's a very unique climate to grow grain because it's high elevation. It's about 7,500 feet there. It's dry. It's hot in the daytime. It's cold at night. And then that whole valley is an ancient lake bed, so it has a really unique soil type. So they're growing these heirloom varietals of grain that were brought there generations ago and now have kind of crossbred over the generations to become their own unique varietals of grain.
Yeah, and we obviously focus on terroir a lot. And Sam said you hear that word a lot in the wine world. It was actually kind of argued for a long time that, grains didn't express the same flavor terroir as wine. And one of those reasons is because grain farmers have never really had to grow for flavor, right? They typically grow these high yield commodity grains. About 85% of distilleries in the entire country still get their grains from 5 commodity huge farms. So a lot of the whiskey that you're getting, good, bad, expensive, cheap, that's still probably coming from these, 5 commodity grain farms. And a lot of distilleries won't focus on their grain at all. If you go to a lot of distillery tours, they'll kind of go right by that, what their grain is or where they source their grain from. So by being able to really dive into our regionality and have such great relationships with our farmers and know exactly what season our grains are coming from, being able to go down to our farms and discuss all those elements with our farmers, it really shines and makes a difference in our whiskey for sure.
Right. Well, Colorado's been producing these grains for a long, long time. So it's not like it's unfamiliar to Colorado farmers that this stuff is here, right? So it's interesting though that, and we've speaking to different distillers and different people in the industry, right? I mean, they've mentioned that you mentioned the commodity farms, like there was like beer and feed. That was like the 2 things that people grew it for. And I don't think beer is necessarily looking for the same flavor profiles that whiskeys are, right? Because you're not getting that refined flavor profile. So it's interesting though that we're coming around now, and the craft distillery world is driving that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. And the craft distillery world and the craft beer world is really driving the survival of a lot of these small farms too, because, they can't necessarily compete against these larger commodity farms. So we've had the pleasure of working with some of these farmers who have, pulled back and really focused on these flavor grains too, which is really nice.
The relationship is totally codependent. I mean, we couldn't do what we do without these farmers.
Right.
And for their business, selling grain to distilleries has been huge. It's changed the entire business. So
right. Yeah. Well, and I know obviously you guys are very proud of your rye as well as your bourbon, but specifically rye, as I understand, rye is thrives here in Colorado in the high country and the climate we have here, right? So tell us a little bit more about how that rye would stand out based on the grain stuff you're using here versus lower elevations and other places where you're going to find that product.
Yeah, well, this rye in particular is such a big, bold flavor. It's beautiful, and that rye is able to produce those flavors because it's stressed out in that environment. They have ancient water rights down there because the family's been down there for 100 years. So they can give it water when it needs to, but it's a very dry climate, and those hot days and the cold nights stress the plant out, force the roots to go deeper and produce this big grain forward flavor. So the San Luis Valley rye that we have here, our whiskey, the rye varietal is called SLV rye because it is now recognized as being unique to that one valley. But a lot of people think with rye as being kind of one-dimensional. It has spice, right? And it's kind of like a cracked black pepper. This has so much complexity to it. There's these beautiful vegetal notes. There's some citrus notes. We get a lot of black tea in our whiskeys because of the grain we use, and it's in the rye, it's in the bourbon, all of our whiskeys. It's unique, and it's full body. It coats your mouth. It's just a really fun experience sipping on that whiskey.
And not only do we use this very special, varietal of rye that can only be found in this one pocket of Colorado, but it is 100% of that rye. So, much like bourbon has to be 51% corn, rye has to be at least 51% rye. And a lot of ryes that you see on the market will still be at that, 60, 70%, throw a little bit of corn in it to, sweeten it up. some malted barley for that conversion factor. You'll see some 95.5 ryes out there now with that 5% barley for that conversion of starch to sugar. But we do this 100% rye. It's 50% raw rye, 50% malted rye to still get that conversion. So not only do you have a rye with a very unique varietal of rye grain, but you're just getting 100% expression of that rye, which is pretty unique.
Right. And you had mentioned you're doing a sour mash process for that too.
We do sour mash for all of our whiskeys here. Yeah.
Okay. And then so like how, I guess going back, how far is that mash still from like
so it's fresh back set. So what we do is when we are running a stripping run, when that waste product, which is the grain, the water, dead yeast, whatever other trace alcohols may be in there, that gets separated off. So the solids go out for cattle feed, and that sour liquid backset is separated off. And we'll add a little bit of that backset from the last distillation to the next cook. And that's going to acidify the strike water to get us in the ranges we like to be for the brewing process. But it also adds a substantial amount of flavor and character to your whiskey. Yeah. There's been times where we don't have backset available, and we've used some other kind of acid to acidify the strike water. It just doesn't have the same character to it as sour mash whiskey does.
Sure. So, I mean, the seasonality here in Colorado is wild, right? I mean, if you've never spent a springtime in Colorado, come prepared for everything, right? From, shorts weather to frigid cold, right? So, and fall can be very similar, right? And that's harvest time, right? So even summers vary a lot, right? So tell us how, especially when you're making whiskey, right? You're trying to make a more consistent product every year, but your grains can vary every year. The harvest time can be, cut dramatically short, like all that stuff, right? How in the world do you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's huge for us because we're buying grains from just 2 small family farms, and the conditions of each growing season change the grain pretty drastically. Now, our head blender, James Kuntz, strives for consistency, but we know that we're at the mercy of the grains we're using because we're just buying them from 2 farms. So season to season, the flavors are going to change a little bit. It's been most evident. There was one year in particular that is burned into our memories because the rye was very heavy in a certain protein that made it very difficult and challenging to process in our plant. We couldn't keep it in fermenters. It would just blow up. And so every morning you'd come in and this you hear it just dripping over the fermenters as you come in, and you got to get the pressure washer out and clean everything off the first thing you do in the morning. Man. But it's a factor in flavor for sure, but we lean into that.
Right.
I think our whiskey year to year is very similar, but there's going to be nuanced flavor differences.
Right.
So, and some of the grains, like you said, the rye is actually planted in the fall. It goes dormant over the winter, and then it sprouts in the spring. They have it grazed down by sheep and goats, so it produces a viable crop for them.
Get fertilized too at the same time.
Good. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the wheat and the barley are the spring crop. So, and corn. Yeah. So,
it's fun to see kind of some of that seasonality as well. Sam mentioned our head blender, James, and he does a wonderful job of our kind of flagship bourbon and rye. Those will be batched in 100 barrels. So there are about 100 barrels that come together, and he chooses those barrels and blends them together to get that consistency. But in some of our bonded products, we release bottled and bond. We were actually the first distillery in Colorado to ever produce a bottled and bond bourbon. And now this year's release, we have a 7-year bonded bourbon, a 7-year bonded rye, and a 7-year bonded wheat. So they're all at 7 years this year. But one of the big things about bonded is that it has to be, made in one distillery in one distilling season, which is just 6 months out of the year. So for us, that also, means one harvest season. Yeah. So you do see some really cool grain variation from year to year, and even season to season. So last year we produced and put out an 8-year bonded bourbon, and we did 2 of them. And so if you see those on the shelf, you'll see it either says F or S on it. So that's the spring or fall distilling season.
Okay.
And even though they were produced, in the same year, in this exact same process, same facility, aged for the exact same amount of time, they do have really cool nuances to them. So that's really fun too, because again, we are a grain forward distillery. We want to highlight those grains and highlight kind of the personality and what the grain flavor actually brings to the whiskey for sure.
And so being that these releases they're all small batch, that you have people who drink your whiskey specifically for that, because they're not looking necessarily for consistency, but because of the uniqueness of your product.
Experience,
Yeah.
So tell me, we talked about Headwater. Your wife works here. Al and Marianne. You guys have mentioned this before, but local sourcing, it takes a village, right? That's I believe the mantra that Al is.
It's one of our many mantras we have here for sure.
It sounds like you're building a village. You got farm, you got whiskey. It's like everything and your family involved. Yeah. Tell us more about that and how that impacts not only the product, which I'd love to hear that too, but the working culture and you guys, and it sounds like you guys are very sounds like you're more of a family than you are.
Well, I think we're very lucky to work in this industry. It's a great industry to work in, and we don't want anyone here who doesn't want to be here. This isn't. It's a job at the end of the day, of course, but it's not a job to a lot of us. We're all very passionate about whiskey. And about what we do and proud of what we do, because we're all so involved in the decisions made for our product. We don't have a master distiller here. It's not my title. I'm the head distiller. I manage the production of spirits, but everyone on our team over here and on James's side at the barrel house, they have an input. And if they want to try something, they want to learn something, we'll bring something in, we'll do it different. So we create a culture that everyone has committed something to the product. And it means a little bit more for sure to us because of that.
Yeah. Al is, a self-described whiskey nerd, and he has I think, great habit of seeing and seeking out and kind of collecting other whiskey nerds. So I think our village is just a collection of whiskey nerds right now. And it's one of those things that everybody does have input. And when no matter what your position is in the company, when you come in, one of the first things that you do is, work alongs with the distillers on the production floor. So you really get a sense to understand it from the ground up. And then we do have such great relationships with our farmers as well. So, I think it's a great sense of pride to be able to say that when you drink our whiskey, the grain in our whiskey has only ever been two places, on the farm where it's grown and malted, and then in our distillery. And, if someone asks me a question that I can't answer about grains, I can text any one of our farmers and they will get back to me right away. So it's great to have that relationship and understanding, because you can really wrap your head around the whole process, and everybody in our company in this village has that knowledge and understanding, which is really cool.
Well, it's clear to me that, for all we talked about today and Al's original approach to this, there's a lot of heart in these products, and I taste that coming through the bottle, and it's
definitely.
Laws is one of my favorites that I enjoy routinely, right? And it's a great product that comes through like that. So Sam, let's circle back just a little bit and tell us more about some unique stuff that you're excited about coming up, and any new techniques you're using or any new experiments that are coming out. Tell us more about what's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. We probably make 99% whiskey here, and most of that production time is spent between our two flagship products, the bourbon and the rye. But with Al's approach, he always wanted to make 4-grain bourbon, but he also wanted to showcase each one of those mother grains. So we do make some 100% wheat whiskey, 100% rye whiskey. We make some fun corn whiskey. Most people don't think of corn as contributing too much flavor, but it definitely does, and it's fun to be able to taste those whiskeys as well as 100% malt whiskey, and see what they're contributing to our whiskeys. But beyond whiskey, like I kind of just said about the community and about people wanting to learn something, if we want to make something else, then we'll bring it in and we'll run a short run towards the end of the year usually. So we've made some agave recently, agave spirit. We've made a good amount of fruit brandies here. We've made apple brandy, plum brandy, and then all different grape varietals. And then because we're opening this new tasting room, we want to have a full, vibrant cocktail menu, right? So we have to make some of these things that contribute to those great cocktails. So we've made a curacao, which is based on the aged brandy that we have, which is now about 7 years, been aging in French oak. There's a Amaro, which this one is more like an aperitif, so it's a little lighter, sweeter, floral, and fun. But we've put out some of the brandies. We'll have Marianne's Promise, the rum that we've made. We made it quite a long time ago, and it has been aging. We'll be showing its label here soon. Am I missing anything?
I don't. What are you? Are you doing some vermouth? Are you?
Oh yeah. So we're going to be working on a sweet vermouth for a cocktail program over there, working with a local winery, which I'm very excited about. I think it's coming along nicely. I love a Manhattan. So on James's side, he has a lot of flexibility with specialty aging, especially finishing and casks that he sources from all over the place. So that's a big product line in our experiential series. He does a really great job with that. One of them being the cognac finished bourbon whiskey that we put out, which is mature bourbon that rolls into first fill cognac casks, French oak casks from the cognac region. And then they're aged for another year or beyond in those first fill casks before they're rolled into a giant cognac foeder, which is a large scale oak vessel. It fits about 32 barrels, I think, of bourbon. Wow. And that cognac foeder was used as a blending vessel for cognac for 50 years or so before we got it.
Oh wow.
So James does somewhat of a slower process over there where he now has this thing full and been aging for years. He'll deplete it by 1/3 every year and have those first fill cognac casks bourbon aging in them, ready to top it back off. So
it's almost like an infinity barrel. Just keep it.
That's
cool.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, James has a lot of really cool projects under the bourbon or whiskey line, at least.
Yeah, the cognac was kind of a insider and fan favorite that we released in the tasting room, and now this is 2024. We'll release it again or I guess 2025. We'll release it in the fall, and it will be our fourth year, our fourth iteration of this now kind of wider release. So every year, because we're like layering that bourbon into the foeder and only harvesting, about 25% for every single release, and then immediately topping it back up with bourbon aged in those cognac barrels. It has a personality and really cool uniqueness.
Sounds
to
really
it every
complex.
year.
And we'll always have a couple of these bottles offerings on the shelf in our tasting room if people want to try them. But soon you'll be able to sit down and have them in a cocktail too at our new tasting room.
And for our listeners, don't expect them finding this stuff on shelves. You have to come to the tasting room to try this stuff. So be sure to stop by. Again, you guys have a new tasting room, which by the time this episode launches, it'll hopefully be open, right?
Knock on wood, Sam.
But tell us a little bit more about the tasting room and kind of what you guys are excited about there.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. I've been here for 5 years, and we've been talking about it enthusiastically for the 5 years that I've been here.
Sure.
And right now we have a small little tasting room that is very loved, and we obviously offer these tours, and we can do neat pours and, flights of whiskey. And we're just really excited to kind of launch this brand new tasting room right next to our current distillery. That's really going to be, more of a visitor experience. Al was really intentional about getting the whiskey right first. There's a lot of distilleries out there that have these kind of big grand tasting rooms, and like the whiskey's kind of like the secondary part to the experience. And we focused on our product, and now we're excited to unveil this new tasting room that is at the quality level of what we think, we're pouring into your glass. So this will be the first time we will be able to have cocktails in a cocktail lounge and really express the whiskey in that type of way as well. So we're really excited to have this as like a staple and really an educational space for our whiskey.
Circling back to something you said, Al wanted to make sure that the whiskey was right first. And I understand that you've received a few accolades recently for that whiskey. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've received a few accolades throughout the years that we're very proud of, that we can really hang our hat on. This year, though, we received through the World of Whiskey Awards the honor of best small batch bourbon in the world. So that's something that we're really excited about and hanging our hat on. People always talk about Kentucky bourbon. You
compete with some big names for that, right?
Yeah. Kentucky bourbon is great. We are not trying to be Kentucky bourbon. We are a Colorado bourbon. But the way kind of this competition does break down is it's the best small batch Kentucky bourbon and then non-Kentucky bourbon, but then it goes for world's best. So this year, not only did we get best non-Kentucky bourbon, but then we did beat out Four Roses to be the world's best small batch bourbon. So definitely something
we have to bleep that out, or Four Roses like that.
I don't think so.
Send a cease and desist to we gotta put that episode. All right, sorry, man.
I don't think they're too worried about us.
I don't think so.
It's nice to be recognized. I mean, we put so much work into this, and of course, we believe we're producing world-class whiskeys here. So
sure. I mean, Four Roses. I mean, the name carries, right? And
I love Four Roses.
Yeah,
it's great, right? And they do a great product, and they're well known. And it's cool to see Colorado. You're not the only distillery recently. It's been
Colorado's
recognized in space. So to me, that's exciting, right? Because I think we talked a little bit before about Colorado and it's where it's going with in the craft world and the name it's making for itself. But tell us more about how you guys are playing a role in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that going back to Kentucky bourbon, that's kind of recognized as something in the United States as quality bourbon. But I think we are seeing kind of a new wave of bourbon as well. So I think really in the next 10 to 20 years, as more distilleries across the country are able to pull back and embrace their regionality and use those grains from their region and those resources, we're going to see a very different American whiskey map develop, where you see very much in Scotland with the different regions of Scotch, where you will start to see kind of, those and recognize those New York whiskeys. Right. And, they have that big Empire Rye program and Texas whiskeys and Colorado whiskeys. And so I think now people are really starting to perk up and pay attention to kind of that regionality.
Sure.
And that's really important to us, and be able to say that we are, from the beginning, grown, distilled, aged, and bottled in Colorado and proofed down with Colorado water. We're just really excited to kind of at the beginning of all of this really plant our flag in the ground and be a Colorado whiskey and really represent those Colorado flavors in our whiskey.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think we're very fond of our peers here in Colorado too. I think there's some really great stuff coming out now.
Absolutely.
That we've been making whiskey here for 15 plus years, and there's some mature, really well made whiskeys on the market from Colorado.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, the other folks we've interviewed, great people making great products, and it's exciting to see that come around. But for you guys, it doesn't end here in the distillery, right? Like, it goes beyond that to not only where you're sourcing stuff, but where you're making whiskey, but you guys are also giving back to the community. So we'd like to spend a few minutes talking about our Angel Share segment, which is where Ryan and I, we met through a fostering program. We were fostering kids, and so it's a part that is near and dear to our heart to give back to the community and stuff. And so, heavily involved in our faith-based program stuff in Colorado Springs there, and we love highlighting the opportunities that you guys have had to give back to the community. And I understand you've been a part of a number, right? And I think one that you shared with a distillery down the way here Tell us a little bit about that one. And then you spoke about waters too. Why don't you give a segue into that?
Yeah. So one that we released last year that we're really proud of, and it goes along with what Sam was saying about just the Colorado distilling community as a whole. We did a collaboration wheat whiskey that we released last year with 6 other distilleries. So it was 7 Colorado distilleries total. And that was really great because to really first highlight the camaraderie within the Colorado distilling industry. You see a lot of collaborations in the beer industry, but you don't really see a lot of collaborations in the spirits or whiskey industry. And so we wanted to highlight that to show that, we are all friends. We all appreciate each other and learn from each other and talk. So this was almost 9 years in the making. But quite a long time ago, all of these 7 distilleries got together, chose a mash bill, took the same wheat from the Cody family farm down in the San Luis Valley and distilled wheat whiskey at all of our distilleries. And then we brought them back and married them together and then aged them in barrels in our distillery and then released that as a collaboration wheat whiskey. And from the beginning, we got every aspect of that donated. So the Cody farm donated those grains. We got the bottles donated. We got the labels donated. Every distillery donated their time and resources. So we were able to, when we sold that, 100% of the proceeds from those bottles went to Colorado causes that we cared about. So each distillery was able to pick a cause, and us and Bear Creek teamed up and we did do the same cause, which is actually a building right down the street that is going to help and house homeless and unhoused youth of Colorado, which was something that's really close to.
We had an opportunity to talk to Jay about the project, and it sounds like a really good project.
Should be opening that building soon. So
and it's hyper local. It's here in your neighborhood, and so it's a really beautiful thing to be able to.
Yeah, they always had a youth center down there, but now it's going to have a lot more resources and housing for these kids too. So
so just to be able for everyone to get together, and then it was aged for. Was it 7 years? I'm thinking 7 distilleries, and it was aged for 7 years as well. So just for everyone to see that so long ago and donate to that, and really, it's quite a feat to be able to give 100% of proceeds from those
from a
sales
distillery
as
standpoint,
well.
and that's a lot. That's a big commitment, right? Because you're talking about production volume, yes, but then you're talking about storage for 7 years, right? And that's, I mean, yes, there was a financial contribution given, but to me, it sounds like you guys gave a lot more than just even what maybe came out in the financial, the big check that went to the program, which totally worthy cause. There's a lot of unhoused kids and stuff, and unfortunately, like we were privy to watching some of the dissolution of like the big group homes, right? And where do those kids go? A lot of them ended up out on the street. So we fully backed that project. It was a really great project to do, but I mean, you put a little more than just whiskey behind that. So that's,
you guys put time, which is a much bigger investment.
We're all happy to do it. So,
and we are lucky to be able to have quite a few releases that we're able to do something with like that. Last year we did our first Women of Law's single barrel pick, where we kind of organized all the women within our organization, and we got to do this really cool barrel pick from. We all got together, talked about the tasting notes, picked this barrel. We worked on the label together. It was a very collaborative label design, and then who we were going to donate some of these proceeds to. And for the Women of Law's barrel last year, we were able to donate to Frontline Farming, which is a BIPOC and woman-led farming advocacy program within Denver. So that was really exciting.
Yeah.
Our Origin series that Sam mentioned, every year we donate a portion of the Origins on Colorado Gives Day, which allows our donation to be matched. And then each villager employee within our village is able to pick their own organization that they donate to. So that's another thing where we focus on a lot of philanthropy, but we also allow everyone to kind of focus on something that they personally care about as well. So the Origins release is really close to our heart, and every teammate's heart as well.
Right. That's good. Well, and you have a new one coming up, correct?
We do have a new one coming up, which is super exciting. It's going to be the first in a series release.
There it is.
There it is. And it's our Headwater series. So a lot of our focus is around kind of water conservation and water rights. And, we've done a lot within the distillery. Sam can talk to that about, how we're trying to, save and recycle and reuse water. So we will have, this is the first Headwater series that's focused on the Colorado River, but, Colorado is the headwater state. There's a lot of rivers that are very important to a lot of different states that kind of start in Colorado. So we want to focus on those and focus on the water rights and water conservation of each of those rivers. So this one is a special 4-grain bourbon that is also proofed down with a little bit of water from the Colorado River as well. And then a percentage of proceeds from this will go to an organization that is focused on protecting and conserving specifically the Colorado River.
That's a huge topic, right? Because, the Colorado River, for those who don't know, is pretty much the main water source for the Southwest region, including Nevada, Utah, Arizona, obviously Colorado and California, and even Mexico, right? So it's a huge river, right? There's been concerns about water levels of the reservoirs along the Colorado River all the way down into Arizona and further. So this is I know this type of effort is going to have multi-generational impacts if we do it right? So
absolutely. And, we recognize that whiskey alone can't, do all for any of this, but it is something that it's important to us. Water is a huge component of whiskey, from our productions to growing the grains. So, we really just want to highlight that and really, kind of one drop at a time, help with this project for sure.
So Sam, tell me about what went into this and tell us what makes this particular product special.
Yeah, so this is a small batch blended by James and the team over there. So when James is picking out barrels for the batch, our flagship product, he's going to pull down a couple hundred barrels and taste through them all, kind of categorize them in flavor profiles. But he's also going to go through and pick out some outliers that he thinks are special as well. So those barrels are always something that you can go back and use to create a small blend or something special we're putting out. First impressions drinking this whiskey, it's going to hit all of our classic notes that we get with our 4-grain bourbon from the grain. So black tea or pico tea that we talk about a lot because it has that nice orange citrus nose to it. Honeysuckle, even honey. But you're going to get to taste all the great grains that we have in it too. Peyton, our CFO, actually got some water from the headwaters of the Colorado River, right where it starts, and a very small amount was added to proof this whiskey back as well. Okay. So it's just a little fun thing to tie it all back together.
Yep.
More terroir, right?
Exactly,
awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the label is a topo design. We worked with a local company, Kind Design, on that. So on that front label, that bend in the river is actually a part of the Colorado River, right kind of in the Grand Junction area.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's called Me Canyon, kind of that Horse Thief Canyon down there. So that is part of the Colorado River that you see on the label as well.
Right. Yeah. So you guys are obviously producing the whiskey, and it sounds like it's going to be great. But that would not be without people buying this thing, right? So how do people get involved with this particular initiative, and how can they help support the cause here?
Yeah, this is going to be available both in our tasting room and then online to ship to your door from lawswhiskeyhouse.com.
Well, I think right now we're going to move into the tasting segment, but for now we'll close off here. Sam, Casey, thank you guys for joining us today. This has been a great conversation, and we're looking forward to seeing the impact this does and we maybe circle back and and cap off what contributions you guys are able to give for that. So that'll be exciting. So anything else?
No. Thank you guys very much for having us.
Thank you.
For your time.
Awesome. We're going to do our tasting segment now with Sam and Casey here at Law's Whiskey House, and they're going to be featuring a special release that they're releasing this year. Sam or Casey, why don't you guys kick it off?
The fun part.
The fun part, the whiskey drinking part. So we are going to I'm going to walk you guys through kind of our 3-step tasting process. This is a way we really like to introduce kind of whiskey to everybody. Okay. So we are going to take 3 sips out of this total. So every time I do say, like cheers or sip, we're not, chugging it all back. We want to save some. But
good note.
Before we
already, that's good start.
Before we do anything, do not put this up to your nose until I tell you to. Okay. That's the most important part. You just have to listen to me for a little bit. Because that's the first mistake that lots of people make when they're nosing and tasting whiskey. I pour whiskey, and the first thing people want to do is kind of dig their nose right into it.
That's what I do.
Okay. And you can actually kind of ruin your tasting experience with that.
Do you want to get your poking stick so you can slap it?
Stick. My teacher.
You can't see, this is Casey's awesome design here, and she even has her poking stick when she's instructing.
In case I need to whip anybody into shape. But it's not like, whiskey is a high proof spirit. It's not like a fine wine. We don't want to dig our nose too far into it because it can actually singe or burn our olfactory nerves in our nose. And the olfactory nerves are what help us smell and evaluate whiskey. And when you actually singe your olfactory nerves, it takes your body about 30 to 40 minutes to regenerate those nerves. So when you dig your nose too far into a glass of whiskey, you can really almost ruin a huge, huge part of that experience. So I really like to nose my whiskey kind of chin to chest area is a good area to kind of walk the whiskey around, the glass around. I even like to roll it along my chin. That almost forces you to open your mouth because that's how you want to nose your whiskey. You want to breathe in your nose and then out your open mouth. So you're just going to get a lot more nosing notes. Don't believe me? Open your mouth, close your mouth. I'm telling you the truth. It's science. I don't know. So yeah, let's just kind of nose that first. And this is what we like to call kind of just our acclimation nose and sip. Okay. So, this may be your first whiskey of the day.
We'll say it's 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You don't know me, bro. Yeah.
It's my first whiskey of the day for sure.
For the record, it is 5 o'clock in the evening. It is not.
It's not 10 a.m.
10:45 in the AM. Yeah.
But if I not to put any pressure on you, but like what do you smell in this?
I certainly smell sweetness. Obviously, bourbon comes through, right?
Particularly with this, the sweetness is really present. I mean, honey or honeysuckle.
Yeah, I can get some of that black tea. I think is one thing that was described. So
I get some barrel flavors too. So caramel, some of those barrel notes are coming through nicely.
And again, this is our acclimation smell. So you get a lot of people that say like, I smell whiskey, I smell alcohol, ha ha ha. Like, yes, absolutely. If you smell whiskey, alcohol, college, regret, like those are big answers, okay? This is what you're smelling. We're acclimating. So now we're going to do our first sip. Okay. And this sip, we're not really trying to taste the whiskey or pick up any tasty notes. We're really just coating our palate and getting our whole mouth ready. So we're going to take a little sip. We're going to chew on it, swish it around like mouthwash, and then swallow it. So cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
So I had the opportunity to meet a sommelier in Wisconsin at a distillery up there, the one called J. Henry.
Oh, yeah.
And the term wet your whistle comes from this process of initially wetting your, what he told me anyways. I don't know. Maybe there's probably some grammar out there. But
someone will comment and say.
So the term wet your whistle came from this process of what we're doing right now. We're wetting the whistle, getting that first burn off, acclimating it.
Yeah, that makes sense. There you go. And if you have someone in your life that does not like whiskey, so sad, I know, but sit them down and do this process with them because you can turn a lot of people. We lose a lot of potential whiskey drinkers on that first sip, right? People, you know, you're at a bar in college the first time, someone's like, take this, here's a shot, you do it, you're like, oh, what was that? Thank you, no thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's this high proof spirit, we do kind of want to acclimate and prepare our palate. So now we're going to go in for just that second smell. And you guys did a really great job at picking some of that stuff out.
I get more floral notes for me. I mean, there's some, I can't pin down the flower scent perfectly right now.
Like an herbal. I'm getting a little bit of like toffee, I think.
Yeah, I get a lot more of that herbaceous. So where you might have gotten like whiskey or alcohol on that first, maybe you can get some of those sweet notes. You guys got really great sweet notes on that first one.
Yeah, and I think for us sometimes it's easy to overlook the standout flavors and aromas because we're so used to our whiskey, we're sometimes looking deeper and looking what's different or what nuanced flavors are in this batch in particular.
Yeah, I'm picking up a little bit, like a hint of citrus too, a little bit. It's not not heavy, but you know, we're getting that herbal stuff too. But other than this, like smells a bit orange peel or something.
Like that, almost like orange, peel,
like a slight like clove. Almost. Yeah,
totally. Usually comes from the rye.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second sip is our evaluation sip. So we've acclimated. Now we can kind of sip and appreciate and taste this whiskey, this bourbon. So cheers.
Cheers.
I get a lot of citrus, kind of hits me right up front, but also there's a fun playfulness between, I think, wheat and rye initially.
Mm-hmm.
You get some of the spice, you get some of the herbal notes from rye, but I think
really balances.
The wheat has that really nice sweetness, but it has a kind of this feisty, peppery note. Our wheat in particular, it's a fun kind of spice.
And the finish lingers like in a very pleasant, like it's hanging out with you. But it's like I'm still experiencing and it's gonna, you know, and you're getting that slight warmth from the rye, right? That peppery warmth that comes in, right?
And you get on that finish, you get those oak notes coming in. I think this has quite a bit of mature barrel notes in it that come towards the backside.
But for someone who might be afraid of a rye finish because it has that high intensity peppery finish, this is not. This is very subdued, but still nice. You know,
it kind of hits you on the back end, like the first when you first taste it, it's sweeter, and then that pepper note kind of comes through on the finish.
We seek out that mint note in our rye. We really love it. And some barrels, it's a little more subdued. But when we get that kind of bright mint note, we definitely want to include those barrels because that's something we really like. With the rye, you get anise, you get herbaceous notes, but the mint is something we seek out.
Yeah.
And when I'm kind of picking out tasty notes, sometimes I get really dorky and I close my eyes and I have to kind of sit in the dark with it for a little bit. But a lot of times I'm really pulling from my memories. So a lot of my notes will be like, oh, this one camping trip, or like sitting in the kitchen cooking at this one time before I really am able to narrow it down to what that tasty note is.
Yeah.
And, you know, there is no right or wrong answers when you're talking about tasting. That's one of the coolest parts about whiskey is it's so subjective. And everybody evaluates whiskey differently. So I always tell like people, you know, don't get hung up on these hoity-toity tasting notes. You can absolutely go with what you know. You know, the reason that I told you not to dig your nose too far into this glass and your olfactory nerves are so important is because the olfactory nerves are the only nerve in your entire body that have like a straight shot to the limbic system in your brain, which is the part of your brain that stores memories. So usually the first thing you get is a memory. Yeah. So, you know, one tasting note that I always joke about that personally I don't like is marzipan. You know, you hear it everywhere. You see it in big tasting notes, in write-ups in magazines, on the little tasting notes in the liquor store. Marzipan is everywhere. I don't know how often you all eat marzipan, but I can say I have only had marzipan like twice in my life. So marzipan will never be a tasting note for me.
I don't know if I've ever had marzipan. I've had mazapan growing
up. That is similar.
So, that's like more peanut buttery. So it's a heavier note. But
so you really want to go with what you know. you could really throw out any tasting note and I'd be like, oh yeah, absolutely. Great palate. Wow. And that's why, whiskey's so fun. I truly believe there is a whiskey for everybody, because people pick out different notes and people evaluate whiskey differently.
Yeah. To your point, I have a tendency to smell a lot of trees because I grew up camping and I love the smell of trees. Yeah. And but I try to stay away from trees because it's not a tasting note most people recognize. Sure. I don't know what a Ponderosa's pine smells like. So.
and when we're talking about the 4-grain and wanting to taste all of the grains, what we're looking for, corn, people don't associate it with a ton of flavor, but it does have flavor. And I think it has a corn silk kind of note. It sometimes comes off kind of nutty, and you can look for that in there. Of course, sweetness comes from corn whiskey as well, but the barley presents as kind of a toasted bread or biscuity note, oftentimes nutty as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you get obviously kind of that spiciness, that herbaceous from the rye.
Yeah.
Wheat actually tends to surprise people. You can get a lot of, cinnamon and baking spices from the wheat as well. Mm-hmm. So I always describe wheat as like a warm hug. We talk a lot about nosing and tasting, but there's another nerve in your body, in your face, that's really affected by whiskey drinking as well. It's your trigeminal nerve that's kind of throughout your face right here. I'm doing kind of whiskey trigeminal nerve. There's always like a nurse or a doctor that knows more about the trigeminal nerve than me. And it's like, well, actually the trigeminal nerve does all of these things. One of my best friends is a reconstructive facial surgeon. I asked him if I was saying this correctly, and he told me I was.
Yeah.
But the trigeminal nerve, when you're drinking whiskey, specifically tells you a feeling, which is heating or cooling. Mm-hmm. So when you drink a whiskey and you can't really pinpoint that flavor, but you get that heat or that cooling, that's really just your trigeminal nerve telling you that.
That's interesting. Okay.
We have those 100% expressions as well, and I can very much tell the difference between the wheat and the rye. The wheat does hit me kind of in my cheeks and flushes my cheeks, and I get those warming notes. Mm-hmm. The rye hits me right along my jawline and gives me more of like that mint, spearmint.
Yeah,
cooling. That's the same effect you get like when you eat something sour, right? It's that same nerve, right?
Exactly.
You get that same tingle, right?
Yeah. So, you focus on smell, you focus on taste, but then when you kind of recognize also what that trigeminal nerve does as well, it kind of adds another element of being able to pick out notes in there. Mm-hmm. And then finally, the last part is we like to add just a little bit of water. So we have this El Dorado Springs water that we proof our whiskey down with. Sam, I told you
I don't have any left.
There's more 3 sips.
Yeah. So I'll let you guys do this however you prefer. I like to just start with a little tiny squirt and see how it's going to open up your glass. Everybody, again, whiskey's subjective, so everybody likes a different amount of water. I will say it's like a haircut. Like once you cut it all off, you can't go back. Once you add too much water, you can't take it out. So start a little at a time.
We like to also let it sit for a second because as you're adding water, that whiskey is interacting with the water and it gets a little feisty. So 30 seconds or so, it's going to mellow out.
Right. Yeah. Some people are kind of snobby about water. I would never be. Also, there is no wrong way to drink whiskey. If you are drinking whiskey, you are drinking it right. So don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise.
I would say maybe don't put Coca-Cola in
it. Okay. Yeah. We won't judge you to your face in that. We might talk about you behind your back. But, if you're drinking whiskey, we applaud you.
There's that one guy from Kentucky.
I like a bunch of ice and a big pour of whiskey. End of the day.
Yeah. Just even adding just a little bit of water changes everything about that whiskey. So, you hear about it opening up, and it really does. So even just a little bit of water is just going to change your whiskey drinking experience completely. So, cheers.
Cheers. Back to one of our friends a little north of us, that's just fantastic and delicious in there. That's, water or not, that's really good.
Maybe a little softer now.
Yeah, I think I can tastes a lot more of the corn, I think, once we added the water.
Totally.
I'm getting more of that mint too. So some of those more subtle flavors are starting to kind of come through.
Yeah. And this is at 100 proof. So we don't do anything under 95 proof. We are a high proof distillery. Sorry, not sorry. So we kind of start at 95 and go up from there. But one of the things about, having a higher proof is being able to express all those flavors, but also allow you, as the consumer yourself to like add water and proof it down in your glass and get that whiskey expression that you.
And like we said, we cater to the whiskey nerds. So if there's something you're looking for, we probably have it. We have cast strength. There's some big whiskeys down there, bonded, and then our flagship products.
Yeah,
we have something for everyone. Single barrels.
Well, for our audience too, water is cheaper than whiskey, right? So when distilleries are proofing down, it's nothing wrong, right? 80 proof is common, right? But when you do see higher proof whiskeys, it doesn't necessarily mean it's burns. And especially a craft distillery like Laws, right? You guys, I've never experienced the burn that you might get from a higher proof whiskey, even if you're going all the way up to cast strength. Right? There's a certain craft that's put in that, and that comes from blending and all those other practices you guys put in before you guys put it in the bottle. So I've never been off put by the higher proof that you guys put in the bottle. So you guys do a good job.
Yeah. Some of them can get pretty high proof in this unique dry climate that we age whiskey in.
Absolutely.
So it's not uncommon for us to see something coming out of the barrel at north of 140 proof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On weed, and there's some neighboring distilleries that are right now bottling at
137, I think.
Whatever. 291's doing that, right? They have a.
I like it with little lower proof personally, but
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing it going to the bottle like that, and it's a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, our cast strength rye, especially, it's good at a higher proof, and it is surprisingly dangerously drinkable at that proof.
Absolutely.
You would be surprised taking a sip and realizing what the proof is.
Well, as a closing note, cheers.
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 This is great. Thanks, guys, for guiding us through this.
Thanks so much.
And look for the Headwaters Series release on their website, right? You can go to their website. And, or better yet, come down to their tasting room and check out their new digs here and enjoy a nice drink here. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us on Whiskey Wanderlust. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and all other major podcast platforms. And be sure to leave us a rating and review. Follow us on social media and visit us online at whiskeywanderlust.co.